It was a Monday afternoon when the doorbell rang 4 times a sound that demanded attention in my new quiet neighborhood, and I instantly knew my hard-earned peace was about to be destroyed. I'm Skylar Quinn. A 32-year-old senior software engineer had finally achieved the impossible by acquiring her own Oakwood Hills residence, a property worth $150,000 purchased solely with years of savings and investment strategies. My parents arrived unannounced, the very picture of faux sophistication, their smiles evaporating the moment they stepped inside. My mother Denise immediately bypassed congratulations to ask where I had stolen the capital to acquire the property, suspecting I had secretly drained some non-existent family trust fund. My father Jeffrey cut straight to the chase, folding his arms across his chest and demanding to see the purchase documents, immediately insisting I prove I had not embezzled the money. "You are absolutely useless," my mother hissed, her voice cutting through the quiet living room. "You have always been a burden, and there is absolutely no way you possess the business acumen or the money to own this house outright." That moment, standing there in the home I had earned, fueled a cold resolve I had been cultivating since childhood. I walked calmly past their furious faces to the custom mahogany cabinet built into the dining room wall. I pulled out a stack of papers and presented the top one, the title to the house. It clearly stated the non-negotiable requirement for proof of net worth, exceeding $50 million just to gain residency approval in this exclusive community. I laid that document down, watched their jaws drop in stunned silence, then placed a second, smaller document directly on top of it for them to sign. The title of the second document was prominently displayed: Waiver of All Future Financial Obligations. The title on that document may have silenced them, but trust me, their greed was only the opening act. What comes next will shake this family to the core. We're talking confessions. They never expected consequences they couldn't escape. Before we continue, make sure you hit subscribe, turn on all notifications, and stay with me until the very end. And tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from and what time it is right now. I love seeing how far this story travels across time zones. 2 days after the silent confrontation in my new living room, the immediate quiet was utterly shattered by a digital explosion of outrage and fabrications. My mother Denise wasted absolutely no time launching her public campaign of manufactured victimhood across every social media platform she could access. She composed a lengthy, venomous post dramatically titled, "The Daughter Who Abandoned Us," weaving a sophisticated tale of parental sacrifice, only to be repaid with cold indifference and greed the moment I found professional success. She painted me as an opportunistic child who had supposedly embezzled imaginary funds, purchased a ridiculously extravagant property, and then heartlessly used the Waiver of All Future Financial Obligations document as a tool of emotional blackmail. The post quickly garnered hundreds of comments from strangers, all judging my character based solely on her elaborate, self-serving lies. The true sting arrived when my sister Brenda chimed in, cementing the public narrative against me. My sister, whom my parents had habitually spoiled and showered with financial favors throughout her life, while simultaneously demanding my continuous financial contributions, commented with feigned sorrow that I had become consumed by jealousy of her and my parents' supposed close bond, suggesting that cutting contact was an act of pure spite, not necessary self-preservation. Seeing my sister willingly participate in spreading these malicious falsehoods cut deeper than almost anything my parents had ever said, directly confirming the absolute toxicity of the entire family structure I was trying so hard to escape. The digital storm proved to be merely the prelude to my father's Jeffrey's actual legal threat, delivered not in a private email, but as a publicly accessible post on a shared family forum. Instead of acknowledging his signature on the waiver or apologizing for my mother's baseless accusations, my father decided to completely flip the financial script. He dramatically accused me of my own illegal financial maneuvers, specifically threatening to report me to the Internal Revenue Service for alleged tax evasion concerning the substantial monthly financial support I had provided them over the last decade. My father asserted that since I claim those funds as necessary deductible gifts on my personal tax returns, they must be considered taxable income for them, but he maliciously implied I had manipulated the entire situation to understate my own income. This specific move was calculated a cynical tactic designed purely to instill professional fear. The following morning, I received a somber, unexpected call from the Human Resources Department at my company detailing an urgent mandatory meeting regarding serious allegations of financial impropriety and professional conduct stemming from the highly publicized social media posts. The accusations now extended dangerously beyond petty family drama. They were threatening my career as a senior software engineer. The HR manager, speaking in a measured corporate tone, stressed the immediate necessity of a comprehensive explanation concerning the specific tax accusation given the extreme gravity of potential IRS involvement. I understood instantly that silence was my strongest shield against emotional warfare, but it could not protect me from the harsh reality of the bureaucratic machine. I politely acknowledged the meeting request, offering only a brief formal statement about the family dispute being based entirely on demonstrably erroneous facts. The entire confrontation confirmed my deepest fear. They were willing to burn down my professional and personal life to satisfy their relentless financial demands. Without any hesitation, I secured the contact information for a highly recommended litigation attorney. The time for emotional responses was over. It was now entirely a matter of strategy and law. 3 weeks later, I knew that the social media warfare had officially transitioned into a cold, calculated legal battleground. My first meeting with my lawyer, Avery Hayes, took place in her sleek, minimalist office suite downtown, a space that immediately radiated competence and serious intent. Avery listened intently, her expression remaining neutral as I recounted the public shaming campaign and the subsequent malicious tax accusation from my parents. She analyzed their behavior not as emotional parents, but as textbook abusers attempting to leverage legal mechanisms to perpetuate financial control. Avery quickly assured me that the social media noise was irrelevant legally. The only things that truly mattered were the deed to the Oakwood Hills house and my impeccable financial records. She immediately began preparing a formal cease and desist order against my father and mother. However, the situation escalated rapidly when my parents filed an actual lawsuit against me. The legal papers arrived 5 days later, formally demanding the court grant them partial ownership of my new house, claiming their right was based on a completely fabricated entity they termed the Family Development Fund. They asserted that this fund represented years of emotional investment and minimal undocumented financial assistance, which they now quantified as a tangible equity-building asset in my property. This move proved their intention was never simply to embarrass me. They genuinely desired control of my only substantial asset. The sheer audacity of their claim was startling, yet Avery remained calm, viewing the lawsuit as a strategic opportunity to expose their manipulative tendencies under oath. That same evening, feeling the immediate weight of the lawsuit, I placed a call to my grandmother, Eleanor Vance, a retired but still highly respected professor of constitutional law. I cautiously revealed the full extent of the legal action and my father's desperate tax threat. Professor Vance's response was not one of shock, but of deep professional disappointment. She then revealed a pivotal detail about the family's true financial foundation, a crucial piece of information I had never fully grasped. My grandmother explained that the substantial monthly support payments I had been sending my parents for years constituted virtually their primary source of documented income, certainly the only consistent capital flow not covered by minor annuities. More critically, she stated her suspicion that my father and mother had deliberately failed to declare this significant income stream to the Internal Revenue Service, utilizing it as a massive, systematic form of tax evasion over the last decade. Suddenly, the game changed entirely. My battle was no longer merely a fight over a house deed, but a complex legal maneuver against financial crime. Professor Vance immediately agreed to intervene, not merely as a family witness offering emotional testimony, but as an expert legal specialist prepared to provide an affidavit and analysis of the family's documented financial history. She was ready to leverage her legal expertise and credibility to expose the true financial rot within the family unit. Her involvement instantly shifted the power dynamic, transforming my defense into a formidable, aggressive counterattack based on verifiable financial malfeasance that went far beyond their shallow claim over a non-existent fund. 2 months before the hearing, my lawyer Avery Hayes's apartment was completely transformed into a high-intensity legal war room, covered wall-to-wall with documents, financial statements, and deposition summaries. Avery and I began our detailed analysis by focusing on the legal validity of the extremely strict $50 million net worth covenant required for ownership in the Oakwood Hills community. She confirmed that this protective covenant, while highly unusual, was legally sound and completely non-discriminatory in practice, effectively invalidating any possibility that my parents could have legally afforded or financed the property, which instantly shattered the basis of their fraudulent Family Development Fund claim. This initial victory solidified my defense, moving the focus entirely to their egregious actions. During the deep dive into my parents' initial claim filing, Avery and I uncovered irrefutable proof of their manipulative scheme, a critical piece of forged evidence. My father and mother had manufactured a fraudulent email purportedly sent from my personal account in which I ambiguously promised to transfer a percentage of the property ownership to them as a generous act of repayment for their supposed years of emotional guidance and minor assistance. This blatant attempt to fabricate documentation confirm their claim was not merely delusional, but a deliberate act of civil fraud. Avery immediately prepared the counter-evidence, strategically centering the narrative on my parents' comprehensive financial abuse and their cynical exploitation of the legal system solely to seize ownership of my legally acquired assets. The most damning materials arrived secretly from my grandmother, Professor Eleanor Vance. She provided Avery with a meticulous, heavily annotated collection of my father and mother's personal bank statements and various tax filings spanning the past 10 years. These confidential files definitively proved they had systematically concealed the large, regular support payments I had sent them, confirming my grandmother's initial suspicion that this financial assistance was, in fact, their primary, undeclared income. The records clearly established a long-running pattern of severe tax evasion, a far more serious offense than the civil dispute over my house. This documentary proof elevated our defense from reactive to aggressive, transforming the core issue from a family spat over a house into a matter of federal financial crime. Working through the nights, Avery finalized the core counter-strategy. She determined that fighting the lawsuit directly, point for point, would only give my parents the emotional stage they craved. Therefore, Avery made the bold decision not to solely disprove their claims of property ownership, but rather to utilize the overwhelming evidence of financial fraud as a strategic weapon. The goal was not merely to win the civil case, but to achieve a decisive victory by introducing the irrefutable tax evasion evidence into the court record. This tactic would serve two crucial purposes: first, to demonstrate my parents' utter lack of credibility and their malicious intent, and second, to trigger an automatic and unavoidable investigation by the Internal Revenue Service, ensuring the ultimate unavoidable accountability for their years of abusive behavior. The morning of the hearing felt charged with a cold, almost cinematic tension as Avery Hayes and I entered the courtroom. My parents, Denise and Jeffrey, had clearly prepared an elaborate performance, the culmination of weeks of rehearsing their victim narrative. My mother dabbed dramatically at dry eyes while my father leaned heavily on his cane, portraying himself as a fragile patriarch facing immense persecution. They began their testimony with a deluge of exaggerated sentiment, recounting years of supposed financial sacrifice and emotional hardship endured solely for my benefit. My father, Jeffrey, then took the stand, his voice shaky yet authoritative, asserting that the home was essential for establishing his financial stability in old age, and vehemently denying any and all allegations of fraudulent conduct or tax evasion. He presented himself as a simple, honest man whose hard-earned reputation was being unfairly attacked by an ungrateful, wealthy daughter who had forgotten her family roots. His denial offered Avery the perfect opening to deploy our meticulously prepared counter-evidence. Avery's cross-examination was swift, clinical, and completely focused on exposing the gaping inconsistencies within my parents' financial declarations. She presented several documents detailing their fluctuating, often minimal reported income, juxtaposed against the steady, substantial monthly deposits I had consistently sent them for a decade. She pressed Jeffrey on the significant gap between his officially reported income and the lifestyle expenses clearly visible in his bank statements, subtly guiding the narrative toward the undeniable fact that the funds I provided constituted undeclared income. With every question, the calculated facade he had built began to crumble, replaced by nervous hesitation and obvious discomfort under the harsh scrutiny. Just when the judge seemed ready to dismiss the motion based on the implausibility of the Family Development Fund, the situation twisted violently sideways with a surprise witness. My sister Brenda Albright was called to the stand by my parents' legal counsel. Seeing my sister there, elegantly dressed, yet harboring the same predatory malice as my parents, sent a faint tremor through my otherwise perfect composure. Brenda took the oath, and then proceeded to deliver a shocking, meticulously crafted lie that shifted the blame entirely onto me. She claimed that my purchase of the Oakwood Hills home was not a triumph of my financial independence, but the result of extortion. Brenda swore under oath that I had blackmailed our parents, threatening to cut off their sole source of regular income unless they formally agreed to co-sign documents ensuring the house purchase and guaranteeing me full control of the property. She described me as a manipulative tyrant who used my financial position to terrorize them, twisting the truth into a vicious, believable narrative of parental duress and emotional abuse inflicted by the child. I remained perfectly still, watching Brenda's calculated performance from the defense table. My lawyer Avery glanced at me, ready to object, but I subtly shook my head, deciding to maintain my complete silence and composure. I simply observed my sister the final piece of their treacherous puzzle, letting her fully commit to the devastating lie before Avery launched the inevitable, overwhelming counterattack that we knew would destroy their credibility forever. After my sister Brenda Albright delivered her shocking testimony, creating a vicious, unfounded narrative of my supposed extortion, the judge called me to the stand. I approached the witness box with calm certainty, refusing to let the anger and injustice I felt show on my face. My testimony began with a quiet, factual recounting of my journey toward financial independence, emphasizing the fact that I had established a successful career and stable wealth entirely through my own efforts from a very early age. I systematically countered their long-standing narrative of sacrificial parenting by explaining that my financial support was not a return on investment, but a voluntary, long-term commitment made out of a misguided sense of filial obligation, never a legal requirement. I meticulously detailed how I had acquired the home entirely on my own, ensuring there was absolutely no ambiguity regarding the deed or the source of funds. Next, I publicly confirmed the exclusive nature of the Oakwood Hills community, disclosing the precise $50 million net worth covenant required for any purchase within the development. This single, undeniable piece of information instantly demolished my parents' central claim, definitively proving they never possessed the financial standing to afford or purchase the property, making their assertion of co-ownership patently absurd. The silence in the courtroom following that declaration was heavy and deeply satisfying. This provided the perfect foundation for our decisive counterattack. The courtroom atmosphere shifted entirely as my grandmother, Professor Eleanor Vance, was called to testify as our expert witness. Professor Vance, possessing unmatched credibility and legal authority, presented the detailed evidence of my parents' decade-long tax evasion scheme. She professionally analyzed their bank records and tax filings, revealing the stark discrepancy between their minimal declared income and the enormous consistent cash flow provided by my support payments. She clearly explained to the court how my father and mother had systematically concealed that income from the IRS, meticulously outlining the history and magnitude of their financial fraud. Her testimony served as a brutal objective assessment of their character, completely destroying the image of fragile, honest victims they had carefully cultivated. Avery then executed the final devastating phase of our strategy. She presented the court with the fraudulent email my parents had manufactured, and even more critically introduced digital evidence, proving my sister Brenda's direct involvement in creating and editing the fabricated document. The evidence showed Brenda's IP address was used to finalize and send the email exposing her, not just as a malicious witness, but as an active co-conspirator in the fraud against me. Her betrayal was laid bare for the entire courtroom to see. The combined weight of the tax fraud, the blatant financial impossibility of their claim, and the proven conspiracy to fabricate evidence proved absolutely overwhelming. After a short recess, the judge returned, delivering a stern and unequivocal ruling. The court dismissed the lawsuit with extreme prejudice, condemning my parents for their manipulative behavior and the blatant illegal fabrication of evidence. Furthermore, the judge imposed substantial financial penalties on both my father and mother, stating the case warranted reporting their tax files to the appropriate federal authorities for immediate investigation. The legal fight was over, and the only remaining sound was the faint, defeated gasp of my mother as the gavel struck, signaling the end of their control. The morning following the judge's unequivocal ruling, the formal paperwork arrived, solidifying the victory. I received official notifications from both the court and the Internal Revenue Service, confirming the judicial order to transfer all evidence of my parents' extensive tax fraud and financial deception for immediate criminal investigation. The court's swift action validated Avery Hayes's bold strategy of using the tax evasion evidence as our ultimate decisive weapon. A deep, quiet satisfaction settled over me. The ordeal was over, and the abusers were finally facing accountability on a level far beyond the civil matter of the house. I knew the legal ramifications for my father and mother would be severe and unavoidable now that the system had been engaged. Almost instantly, the scandalous details of the case, focusing heavily on the fraud conviction and the looming IRS investigation, began to circulate through the local media. Television news reports featured sensational headlines about a high-profile family legal battle, detailing the judge's explicit condemnation of my parents' manipulative behavior and the fabrication of court evidence. The collapse of my father and mother's meticulously maintained public image was swift and absolute. Their social standing, carefully constructed over decades of pretense, dissolved into public mockery and legal peril, a deserved consequence of their greed and cruelty. The attention was uncomfortable, but it provided undeniable proof that my silence and steadfast refusal to concede had been the correct path. The inevitable attempts at contact started soon after the news broke. My parents and my sister Brenda Albright, desperate to escape the federal investigation, began trying to reach me through every available channel, particularly through Avery. Their lawyers, now scrambling to contain the criminal fallout, reached out pleadingly, attempting to broker a deal. They insisted really that I immediately retract the tax evasion evidence, somehow believing that I possessed the authority or the inclination to halt a formal government investigation. It was a futile, almost comical demonstration of their enduring delusion and their inability to accept responsibility for their own criminal actions. Avery handled the requests with the cold professionalism I had come to admire, delivering a concise, unyielding refusal. She explained clearly that the civil lawsuit concerning the house was formally concluded, but the subsequent criminal and tax investigation fell entirely outside my legal jurisdiction. Skylar is no longer a party to that action, Avery stated in an email response, ensuring all communication was legally documented. The evidence is now in the hands of the federal authorities, and she possesses neither the power nor the desire to interfere with the proceedings. This absolute refusal reinforced the finality of the split, denying them even the psychological comfort of my voice. With the legal battle definitively closed and the federal machinery engaged, I began the long-awaited process of building a truly new, untethered life. The first essential step was complete severance from my toxic past. I changed my phone number, deactivated old email addresses, and instructed Avery to block any further correspondence from them. I refused to grant them a single moment of my attention, not a word of sympathy, not an inch of compromise. The time for mercy was over. Now was the time for consequence. The beautiful, quiet security of my Oakwood Hills home finally became what it was always meant to be: a sanctuary where I could finally live a life defined entirely by my own choices and successes. The tranquility I found was soon interrupted by the final, inevitable piece of news. Avery Hayes forwarded a concise news alert with a short message. They made the headlines. The headline itself confirmed the ultimate consequences of their avarice. My father, Jeffrey, my mother, Denise, and my sister, Brenda Albright, had been formally arrested and charged with multiple counts of serious federal tax evasion. The media reports detailed the extensive long-term scheme and the fraudulent documents they had attempted to introduce, validating every decisive action I had made. It was not a moment of celebration, but of profound finality, an acknowledgement that the toxicity was now fully contained, and they were facing severe legal consequences that were long overdue. Then, something managed to slip through the careful net Avery and I had cast. Amidst a stack of magazines and benign mail, a heavy, poorly addressed envelope arrived, bearing a postmark from the local county detention facility. I immediately recognized the familiar, sloppy handwriting. Inside, written on thin prison-issued paper, was a desperate, rambling letter signed by my mother. It was a masterpiece of manipulative self-pity, a bizarre mix of tearful non-apology blaming external forces for their downfall, and a frantic appeal for me to use my substantial resources to secure their immediate legal assistance. The entire tone reeked of their lifelong refusal to accept responsibility, treating the federal investigation simply as another huge inconvenience I was somehow obligated to fix. I did not need to pause for even a second of reflection. The letter represented their final pathetic attempt to breach the boundary I had so painfully established. I walked directly to the granite fireplace, the thin paper feeling cold and utterly lifeless in my hand. I carefully placed the noxious document into the grate, watched the match ignite the corner, and allowed the flames to consume the flimsy, worthless words without a single flicker of hesitation or regret. The smoke rising from the burning paper represented the last remnants of my old life, finally dissolving into the clean, quiet air of my new beginning. I walked away the decisive action, confirming that I was finally and completely free of them forever. This entire painful journey taught me the most fundamental lesson of life. You are not responsible for the destructive choices of toxic family members, nor are you obligated to set yourself on fire to keep them warm indefinitely. True strength lies not in enduring endless manipulation, but in drawing an uncrossable absolute boundary and having the courage to enforce it even when the world attempts to make you feel guilty or cruel for doing so. Severing a toxic tie is never a failure of love, but an ultimate act of powerful self-preservation, allowing you to finally build a beautiful life rooted in genuine peace and self-earned success. Thank you so much for following my story, for sharing this difficult path toward true freedom and profound self-respect. It has been a long, agonizing, but necessary victory. I truly believe many people unfortunately share similar experiences, feeling the heavy burden of obligation from those family members who only know how to take and destroy. If any part of my challenging story resonates with you, or if you have faced similar tough choices in your own life, I strongly encourage you to share your perspective and thoughts in the comments below. Your voice and perspective truly matters to everyone.